The Pacific Ocean in mid-1945 was vast, regulated, and largely indifferent to the war being fought across it. Trade winds moved steadily from east to west. Swells rose and fell in long intervals, shaped by weather systems thousands of miles away. In the open sea between Guam and Leyte, there were no coastlines, no shipping lanes marked by buoys, and no permanent signs of human presence. At night, the surface reflected little light. The moon, when visible, traced a pale path across the water before disappearing behind cloud cover. During the day, the horizon remained uninterrupted in all directions. Heat accumulated gradually. Salt settled on exposed metal and fabric. Nothing about the environment suggested urgency. It was a place defined by distance rather than threat. In July, this part of the Pacific sat well within territory controlled by the United States Navy. Japanese naval power had been significantly reduced by this stage of the war. Allied ships moved through the region routinely, often without escort. Submarine activity was considered minimal, though not non-existent. The ocean did not register these assessments. It continued its patterns unchanged, absorbing sound, dispersing debris, and erasing movement within minutes. Any object entering the water became part of a surface that concealed as much as it revealed. On the evening of July 29, 1945, one American cruiser was crossing this open water alone, maintaining a steady course under clear skies, surrounded by nothing but sea. The ship was the USS Indianapolis, a Portland-class heavy cruiser commissioned in 1932. By the summer of 1945, it had spent much of the war moving between assignments rather than remaining in sustained combat. It had served as a flagship, provided fire support for amphibious landings, and carried senior officers between commands. Its appearance was familiar across the Pacific Fleet, its gray hull bearing the marks of years at sea. In mid-July, Indianapolis was assigned a mission that was unusual in its secrecy but ordinary in its execution. The ship was ordered to transport a sealed cargo from San Francisco to the island of Tinian in the Mariana Islands. The contents were not disclosed to the crew. Only the commanding officer, Captain Charles B. McVeigh III, and a small number of senior officers were informed that the cargo was critical to the war effort. The material was part of the atomic bomb program, though most aboard would not learn this until after the war. The transit westward was uneventful. The ship maintained high speed, crossing the Pacific without incident. Upon arrival at Tinian on July 26, the cargo was unloaded under tight security. There was no ceremony. The ship did not remain in port. Orders were already in place for its next movement. Indianapolis was directed to proceed to Leyte in the Philippines to join Vice Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's Task Force 95. From there, it was expected to prepare for further operations related to the anticipated invasion of Japan. The route from Tinian to Leyte was considered relatively safe. No escort was assigned. Intelligence assessments indicated that Japanese submarines were scarce in the area, and routine anti-submarine zigzag maneuvers were left to the discretion of the commanding officer. The ship's crew numbered approximately 1,195 officers and enlisted men. They ranged in age from teenagers to men in their 40s. Some were seasoned sailors who had spent years at sea. Others were newly assigned, still adjusting to life aboard a large warship. Daily routines were structured and predictable. Watches rotated. Meals were served at fixed hours. Training drills filled the time between maintenance tasks and navigation checks. Morale aboard was stable. The war was widely believed to be nearing its end. Germany had surrendered in May. News from the Pacific suggested Japanese resistance was weakening. For many aboard Indianapolis, this voyage was expected to be another uneventful transfer between ports, one more stretch of open water before the next assignment. The ship departed Tinian on the evening of July 28, 1945, setting a west-southwest course toward Leyte, moving alone into the open Pacific once again. Shortly after midnight on July 30, 1945, the USS Indianapolis was moving at approximately 17 knots through calm seas. Visibility was moderate. The sky was partly clouded, and there was no moonlight. The ship was not zigzagging at that hour. Captain McVeigh had ordered intermittent zigzag maneuvers earlier in the evening but suspended them due to reduced visibility, a decision permitted under existing Navy guidelines. Beneath the surface, the Japanese submarine I-58 had been tracking the cruiser. Commanded by Lieutenant Commander Makitsura Hashimoto, the submarine had been operating in the Philippine Sea as part of Japan's remaining undersea effort. Just after midnight, I-58 detected Indianapolis and maneuvered into firing position. At approximately 12:14 a.m., two Type 95 torpedoes struck the cruiser's starboard side in rapid succession. The first explosion destroyed the ship's bow, severing a large section forward of the bridge. The second detonated near the center of the ship, damaging fuel tanks, boiler rooms, and internal compartments. The impact was immediate and structural. Power failed across much of the ship. Fire broke out below decks. The hull began taking on water at a rate that exceeded the capacity of onboard pumps. Communication systems were damaged. A distress signal may have been transmitted, but no confirmed receipt was recorded at the time. No escort vessels were present to observe the attack. The ship listed quickly. Captain McVeigh gave the order to abandon ship within minutes of the explosions. There was little time to organize an orderly evacuation. Lifeboats were damaged or inaccessible. Life rafts were released where possible, but many crew members entered the water directly. At 12:27 a.m., roughly 12 minutes after the first torpedo struck, the USS Indianapolis rolled onto its starboard side and sank. The stern rose briefly before disappearing beneath the surface. The sound of the ship breaking apart carried across the water and then faded. What remained were scattered rafts, debris, and several hundred men floating in the open ocean, far from land, in the dark. When the ship disappeared, the ocean closed over it quickly. Oil from ruptured fuel tanks spread across the surface, forming dark, uneven patches that clung to skin and fabric. Debris drifted outward in widening circles. The men in the water were scattered across several miles, grouped loosely by chance rather than design. Approximately 900 crew members survived the sinking itself. Fewer than half of them had made it onto life rafts. The rest floated wearing kapok life jackets, some injured, some burned, many without shoes or protective clothing. The night remained quiet. There were no additional explosions, no sign that the submarine was still nearby. By early morning, the sky lightened and revealed the scale of their isolation. The sun rose quickly. Heat followed. The oil that had coated the water transferred to exposed skin, intensifying the effect of the sun and causing irritation to eyes and mouths. Salt water dried into crusts on clothing. Thirst became apparent within hours. The men had no fresh water. A few rafts carried limited supplies, small tins of water, hardtack, and emergency rations, but these were not evenly distributed. Many groups had nothing. Efforts to organize began informally. Officers and senior enlisted men attempted to gather survivors together, tying rafts with lines or instructing swimmers to hold on to debris. Orders were kept simple. Stay together where possible. Avoid unnecessary movement. Conserve energy. These instructions were practical, but enforcement was inconsistent. Exhaustion, injury, and confusion limited coordination. Sharks appeared on the first day. Oceanic whitetips and other species were drawn by sound, movement, and blood. At first, they circled at a distance. Later, they moved closer. Attacks were sporadic rather than constant, often targeting isolated individuals or those who drifted away from the main groups. The presence of sharks was acknowledged quietly among the men, rarely discussed aloud. Dehydration progressed steadily. Some men drank seawater despite warnings. The immediate effect was brief relief, followed by vomiting, diarrhea, and accelerated decline. Others refused to drink at all, conserving what little moisture remained in their bodies. Sun exposure caused blistering and peeling. Lips cracked. Eyes became inflamed. Night brought limited relief from heat but introduced cold. Body temperatures dropped. Men huddled together around rafts to retain warmth. Those without flotation struggled to remain upright. Sleep occurred in brief, uncontrolled intervals. Some slipped beneath the surface without notice. By the second and third days, discipline weakened. Hallucinations were reported by survivors after the fact, though individual experiences varied. Some believed they saw land. Others spoke of ships or aircraft that were not there. A few attempted to swim away, convinced rescue was nearby. They did not return. The rafts deteriorated. Seams loosened. Air chambers lost pressure. Improvised repairs were made using belts or pieces of clothing. Injuries went untreated. Infections began to set in. The number of men in the water gradually decreased, not through a single event but through continuous attrition. No rescue arrived because no alarm had been acted upon. The Indianapolis had failed to arrive at Leyte on schedule, but its absence was not immediately flagged. No search was initiated. The men in the water did not know this. They waited without reference points, measuring time by the rising and setting of the sun, maintaining survival through routine rather than expectation. By the fourth day, the number of survivors had diminished sharply. Death occurred from multiple causes, often in combination. Dehydration weakened the body first, followed by exposure, injury, or infection. Shark attacks continued intermittently, though they were not the primary cause of loss. Many men simply became unable to keep themselves afloat. Group cohesion eroded further. Rafts that had once held several men now carried one or two. Some were left empty, drifting. Those still conscious faced increasing difficulty maintaining focus. Speech became limited. Movement slowed. The effort required to remain upright consumed most remaining energy. Psychological strain intensified. Survivors later reported confusion and disorientation, though these experiences varied and were not uniform. Some men became unresponsive, staring into the water for extended periods. Others attempted to remove their life jackets, complaining of discomfort or heat. In some cases, they had to be physically restrained. When restraint failed, separation followed, and survival chances dropped to near zero. Weather conditions remained generally stable. There were no storms that would have forced a rapid conclusion. The sea continued its steady motion, indifferent to the number of men it carried. Sun exposure accumulated. Salt sores formed where skin rubbed against fabric or flotation material. Open wounds attracted further attention from marine life. On the morning of August 2, nearly 4 days after the sinking, chance intervened. A U.S. Navy PV-1 Ventura patrol aircraft, flown by Lieutenant Wilbur Chuck Gwynn, was conducting a routine anti-submarine patrol when he noticed an oil slick below. Upon closer inspection, he saw men in the water. Gwynn immediately radioed a sighting report. He marked the location and circled the area, dropping a life raft where possible. Within hours, additional aircraft arrived. The first surface vessel to reach the scene was the destroyer escort USS Cecil J. Doyle. Other ships followed through the night. Rescue operations were methodical and restrained. Men were lifted from the water individually. Some were alive but unresponsive. Others had died shortly before rescue arrived. By the end of the operation, 316 men were recovered alive. Approximately 879 had died as a result of the sinking in the days that followed. The ocean returned to its previous state quickly. Debris was collected where feasible. Bodies that could not be recovered were left behind. The coordinates were logged, and the task force moved on. The survivors were transported first to nearby ships, then onward to medical facilities on Guam and Leyte. Treatment focused on rehydration, infection control, and stabilization. Many of the men were unable to stand. Some did not remember entering the water or being rescued. Recovery, where it occurred, was gradual. News of the sinking spread unevenly. Families were not immediately informed of the fate of those aboard. Official reports took time to compile. The loss of the Indianapolis was significant, but it occurred during the final weeks of a global war marked by constant casualty reports. Its circumstances were not widely publicized at first. In November 1945, Captain Charles McVay was court-martialed for failing to zigzag, despite testimony from the commander of I-58 stating that zigzagging would not have prevented the attack. McVay was found guilty on that charge, though the conviction carried limited formal punishment. The decision remained controversial for decades. Many survivors believed responsibility had been misplaced. The sinking did not alter the course of the war. The cargo delivered days earlier played a role in events that followed, but the men who survived the open ocean returned quietly to civilian life or continued their service. Those who did not survive were recorded in naval registers, their deaths attributed to combat loss. The coordinates of the sinking remained approximate. The wreck itself was not located until 2017, in the Philippine Sea. By then, nearly all who had been in the water were gone. The loss of the USS Indianapolis occupies a distinct place in naval history not because of its tactical importance, but because of what followed its sinking. The majority of deaths did not occur during the attack itself, but in the days after, in open water, without immediate cause or audience. Survival depended less on heroism than on proximity, restraint, and circumstance. Records of the incident remain precise in some areas and incomplete in others. Exact sequences of individual deaths are unknown. Personal experiences vary across survivor accounts. What is documented is the scale of loss and the conditions under which it occurred. In the years that followed, the event became a case study in naval procedure, communication failure, and survival at sea. Changes were made to reporting protocols and tracking systems. These adjustments were incremental and administrative, not symbolic. The Pacific where the men drifted remains unchanged in character. The water continues its cycles, absorbing what enters it and giving little back. What endures is not a single narrative of endurance, but a factual record of exposure, time, and human limitation, preserved without resolution.